Have you ever considered why a simple question like, "Who am I?" can be so difficult to answer? While there are many ways to interpret this question, the one thing we can be guaranteed is that every one of us will have a uniquely different answer to it. Despite us having a lot in common with our fellow human beings, like race, religion, or sexual orientation, there is one thing that makes each of us uniquely different: our personality, the very essence of who we are. Our personalities are very complex. Some people may be slightly similar in some ways, but no two will be exactly the same. Hi, I'm Michelle, a life coach at Skillworks Africa, and in this session I'll help you understand what personality is, explore the different ways our personalities can be classified, and how those classifications have evolved. I'll then explain the Townsend Personality Questionnaire, one of the most universal personality inventories in modern psychology. So today, I'll describe the way the Townsend Personality Questionnaire, also referred to as the TPQ, narrows down an almost infinite list of personality traits to the most important ones that are present in all people. Unlike most personality assessments that are based on theories of personality that have resulted from one particular psychologist's theory or opinion about human nature, the TPQ is based on the understanding that 5 main factors are necessary and sufficient for broadly describing human personality. This is the most modern and collectively agreed on theory by those who specifically study personality. This personality measure was developed by Dr. Gary Townsend of Skillworks Africa in 2005 as a refinement to the original Ocean version of the Big Five. Apart from reframing the original 5 dimensions and their related facets in a more behaviorally accurate way, the 120-item instrument was developed and validated using the RASH approach, a probabilistic mathematical model that has been determined to be the only method able to transform raw data from the human sciences into abstract equal interval scales, and consequently, produce reliable people assessments. But more of that at another time. In this video, I'm going to explain the 5 major Big Five traits, which we refer to as dimensions in the TPQ, as well as the sub-traits, also called facets. But first, let's just take a few minutes to understand the underlying fundamentals involved in measuring personality using the Big Five. The TPQ is a shift from the old bimodal distribution type, 4-dimensional models, like the MBTI, to a distinctly different and more scientifically appropriate model that involves 5 dimensions of personality. A normal distribution of scores on these dimensions. An emphasis on individual personality traits as opposed to type. Preferences for behaviors indicated by a strength of score, and, most importantly, a model based on experience, not theory. It is this experience-based model that is used in personal development areas like self-understanding, interpersonal interaction, management, workplace dynamics, and leadership ability. In terms of its validity, the 5-factor scales are reinforced by the results published in over 2,000 articles, chapters, and books that have been correlated in meaningful ways with scales from the most published personality measures. In addition, the Big Five measures have proven very useful in predicting a range of personal, work, and clinical behaviors like vocational interests, patterns of feelings, attachment styles, and personality disorders. Now let's take a closer look at the integrated way in which the TPQ measure is applied in practice. Because the TPQ is not a theory of personality, but a model based on experience, it does not prescribe interdimensional or facet relationships in a hard and fast manner. Rather, it allows you to use experience-based research to identify specific personality styles based on observations in practice. In this way, using the TPQ to study personality profiles of high and low performers within a specific job allows for the creation of a custom norm that can be used for comparisons and analysis. For example, studies have shown that for sales jobs, extraversion and sociability dimensions are highly predictive of performance, while for blue-collar workers, it appears that conscientiousness and sociability are the dimensions that show a positive relationship to job performance. Given this complexity and potential, throughout most of the 20th century, personality psychologists have debated the question of personality structure, pondering questions like: what are the enduring individual differences that allow us to describe the distinctive features of a person, and how are they organized? Should we measure needs, or traits, or temperaments, or character, and just how different am I? So, after decades of trying to reconcile these alternative models, it became increasingly clear in the 1980s that 5 factors were necessary and more or less sufficient to encompass the trait descriptive terms in natural languages. Although alternative models are still sometimes proposed, it is fair to say that the 5-factor model is the most scientifically rigorous classification that behavioral science has. That being said, let's have a quick look at where this model all started. Since their inception in 1978, the NEO inventories have been designed to assess the most important general personality traits and the factors they define. At first, only 3 major personality factors, neuroticism, extraversion, and openness to experience, whence the name NEO. In the 1980s, further work with the natural language of personality traits led to the confirmation that 5 factors were needed and sufficient to form a comprehensive model. When first published, the NEO personality inventory consisted of 180 items, with 6 facet scales for each of the neuroticism, extraversion, and openness to experience domains, and brief global scales to measure agreeableness and conscientiousness. 4 years later, Costa and McRae introduced the short version, the NEO-FFI, as well as new norms appropriate for use with college-age and adult respondents. Then, in 1992, the NEO-PIR appeared with new facet scales for agreeableness and conscientiousness, and the replacement of 10 of the original NE and O items. 2 years later, translations were made into over 40 languages. In 2005, Dr. Gary Townsend revisited the traditional Big Five in 2 fundamental ways. Firstly, he renamed the Big Five dimensions agreeableness as sociability, and neuroticism as constancy, and openness to experience as originality, and defined each facet with distinctive anchors representing less of and more of the underlying items, with a clear focus on terminology and descriptors that would be more appropriate for both clinical and work contexts. Secondly, he developed the 5 individual measures that comprise the Big Five model using the probabilistic Rasch model, the only current method able to transform raw data from the human sciences into abstract equal interval scales, and in turn, develop behavioral measures. Like all the earlier inventories, the TPQ inventory assesses the 5 factors. Because these broad constructs summarize so much information, they are the logical starting place for assessing one's personality. When interacting in social situations, they explain whether you are persistently predisposed to being energetic and thrill-seeking versus sober and solitary. How when you interact with others, whether you do so in a kind and trusting way versus being competitive and arrogant. Whether when interacting with or experiencing others, you respond in an emotionally distressed versus emotionally stable way. If, in the pursuit of your goals and work, you are disciplined and fastidious, as opposed to laid back and careless. And as you experience the world around you, do you do so in a curious and unconventional way, versus taking a traditional and pragmatic approach to life? These are some of the important characteristics of the 5 factors. As I'll highlight a bit later, these factors are behavioral dimensions and not types, so people will vary continuously on them, with most people falling between the extremes. In addition, these factors tend to stay stable over a 45-year period, beginning in young adulthood. Let's now look at how this all relates to the idea of personality styles. At the highest level, the scores from the TPQ assessment can be interpreted by examining individual dimensions, or pairs of dimensions, called personality styles. This is usually regarded as a high-level overview and taps into the highest and lowest dimension scores. The TPQ report has these high-level analysis graphs that describe each of the dimensions and their potential personality styles. For example, a respondent who has an above-average originality personality style balances creative and imaginative expression with the pragmatism of methodical and well-organized thought processes. They would also typically be open-minded and generally passionate about challenging the status quo and redefining what is and is not possible. As mentioned earlier, the interplay across each of the TPQ dimensions further explains different personality styles. For example, the personality style of impulse control is typically based on a person's score on constancy and conscientiousness. A high constancy and high conscientiousness profile is associated with over-control, while a high constancy and low conscientiousness profile is typically associated with low impulse control. This interplay at the dimension level is usually key to interpreting the underlying facets. Historically, most research on the five-factor model used global measures that assessed only the broader 5 factors. In consideration of the more detailed requirements for clinical and personal development purposes, full-length inventories like the Townsend Personality Questionnaire, with its detailed information on 30 distinct traits, is commonly more appropriate and accurate. This added layer of facet-level information can deeply enhance the interpretation of any specific dimension or related personality style. For example, a person who scores very high on the assertive facet, but mid-range on the engaging facet, may have the same high extroversion score as someone who scores very high on engaging, but only mid-range on the assertive. Yet, these two individuals are likely to have rather different interpersonal styles. So, person A will more than likely be forceful and detached, while person B will be more skeptical yet invested in others despite both having exactly the same extroversion scores. That's the power of the full-length TPQ inventory. So, once again, it is not the isolated extreme score that matters, but rather the overall interplay of all the dimensions and their related facets. Let us now dive into the underlying model in a bit more detail. Because the TPQ model is a universal measurement of behavior, based on language, and the natural way people use it to understand one another, it forms the basis for understanding the uniqueness and potential of individuals. The outer ring of the Townsend Personality Questionnaire represents the big 5 dimensions as proposed by the 5-factor theory. The middle ring represents each of the associated facets, which we will discuss in detail shortly. These behaviors constituting each dimension are used in the TPQ to provide a targeted approach to understanding your personality style. Let's have a look at how we score the responses to the assessment and how the scores are standardized. Each answer to the questions making up the sociable facet, in this example, is firstly transformed into a standardized Z-score, and then into a standard 10 score, also referred to as STEN scores. In this example, this item's raw score is standardized by converting it to a Z-score, which is 1 in this example. This one is then substituted into the formula to convert it into a STEN format, which has a midpoint of 5.5. Next, we have the overall extroversion dimension score example that represents the average of all 6 facet STEN scores, namely sociable, contracted, assertive, thrill-seeking, unguarded, and engaging. In this case, a STEN of 2.5. To put the earlier scores into context, we need to see them in relation to a normal distribution. Here we can see the total extroversion score in context with one of its underlying facet scores, namely the sociable facet. It's this standardized approach in the TPQ that enables us to compare all the scores across dimensions and facets, thereby comparing apples with apples. In addition, these scores can now be further understood in the context of a standard distribution table in terms of Z-scores, percentiles, and IQ scores, among others. All scores in the Townsend Personality Questionnaire assessment use STEN scores in its reports. Finally, let's look at each of the big 5 dimensions and traits that tend to occur together in the Townsend Personality Questionnaire. As mentioned earlier, the TPQ refined the commonly accepted buckets of traits to include terminology that is more appropriate for present-day, academic, clinical, workplace, and personal contexts. The first of the TPQ Big 5 dimensions is extraversion. This refers to the preference for energy, positive emotions, urgency, and the tendency to seek stimulation and the company of others. Those who score high on extraversion are characterized by their preference for being around other people and are generally involved in many activities. Low extraversion, on the other hand, is characterized by a person's preference to energize within their own space and are generally perceived as being quieter and more reserved. People high on extraversion tend to exert more leadership, be more physically and verbally active, and more friendly and outgoing around others than most people. This extrovert profile is the foundation of many important social roles, from sales to politics to the arts and the softer social sciences. On the other hand, the introverts tend to be more independent, reserved, steady, and more comfortable with being alone than most people. These introverted profiles are the basis of such varied and important social roles as production managers and the harder physical and natural sciences. In between these two extremes are the biverts, who are able to move comfortably from outgoing social situations to the isolation of working alone. The stereotypical ambivert is the player coach, who moves as needed from the leadership demands of coach to the personal production demands of the player. In the 5-factor model, extraversion is defined as outer-directed activity and should not be taken to mean pro-social. Also, individuals with low extraversion scores should not be seen as antisocial or uninterested in others, but rather that they simply need less external stimulation and prefer to spend more time alone. As mentioned earlier, the extended value of the TPQ is the detailed facet-level information. Extraversion is composed of the facets sociable, contracted, assertive, thrill-seeking, unguarded, and engaging. The sociable facet refers to an individual's propensity to talk and engage in activities with other people. High scorers on the sociable facet are comfortable interacting with people, animated in groups, enjoy attention, socially adept, talkative, and seek out social interaction. Low scorers are not necessarily antisocial, but they typically avoid interaction with people and tend to be more comfortable with close friends. They also come across quieter and more reserved in groups. Contracted refers to an individual's emotional pledge or bond to multiple people networks. High scorers thrive on interaction with others, feel relaxed and fulfilled when socializing, prefers being active, and are driven by multiple people networks. Low scorers prefer privacy, enjoy spending time alone, need time out after social events, feel energized when alone, and prefer a steady pace. Assertiveness refers to the quality of being self-assured and confident without being aggressive. High scorers comfortably say what they think, like to take charge, express views easily, and are comfortable raising criticism. People with lower scores are not necessarily less assertive, but prefer to avoid challenging things, wait for others to lead, avoid criticizing others, and steer away from disagreement. Thrill-seeking refers to an individual's tendency to want to take part in exciting activities that involve physical risk. High scorers are open to new experiences, are prepared to take chances, exist on the edge, are driven by new experiences, and thrive outside routine. Those with lower scores typically dislike surprises, prefer routine, are serious about life, prefer balance and consistency, and are not prepared to take unnecessary risks. Unguarded refers to an individual's propensity to interact with people in a way that's free from guile or wariness. High scorers usually have a good word for everyone, trust people's intentions, believe what people say, and view others as reliable and honest. Those with lower scores are inclined to believe people should fend for themselves, distrust the intentions of others, are wary of what people say, and feel people are inherently unreliable. Engaging refers to an individual's inherent ability to engage people in something and keep them thinking about it. High scorers enjoy bringing others together, are less self-critical, are comfortable being the topic of discussion, and can laugh at themselves. This does not, however, mean that low scorers are not engaged. Rather, that they tend to care more what people think of them, are very uncomfortable being the object of jokes, and are more concerned about making a good impression. The second of the main big traits is sociability. Sociability reflects a tendency to be compassionate and cooperative rather than suspicious and antagonistic towards others. High sociability describes a person who tends to relate to others in a trusting, friendly, and cooperative way. Low sociability describes people who tend to be more aggressive and less cooperative. People low on sociability may come across to others as hostile, rude, self-centered, and not a team player. At the agreeable end of the sociability facet, the individual is prone to put the group's needs before their own. Cooperation is typically more important to the agreeable than, for example, pushing their own personal notion of truth. The agreeable profile is very often the core of such important social roles as teaching, social work, and psychology. At the other end of the continuum, people anchored at the antagonistic end are more focused on their personal agenda and needs rather than those of the group. The antagonistic profile is more concerned with acquiring and exercising power. They typically follow the beat of their own drum, rather than getting in step with the group. The antagonistic profile is the foundation of such important social roles as advertising, managing, and military leadership. In the middle of the sociability continuum is the affable anchor. The person in this range is able to move from leadership to followership as the situation demands. The two extremes of this trait are often explained as moving toward people, agreeable, and moving against people, antagonistic. In one sense, this trait is about the dependence, or altruism, of the agreeable, the independence, or egocentrism, of the antagonistic, and the interdependence, or situationism, of the affable. Sociability is composed of the facets candid, compassionate, altruistic, modest, empathic, and collaborative. Here candid refers to an individual's propensity to be frank, open, and sincere in speech or expression, free from reservation, disguise, or subterfuge. High scorers will typically assume that others are well-intentioned and trustworthy, while low scores find it natural to think of others as scheming and dishonest. Low scores can therefore be said to be more skeptical and suspicious, while high scores are more good-hearted and charitable. Compassionate denotes an individual's feeling or showing sympathy and concern for others. High scorers are able to overlook others' shortcomings, put aside previous disagreements and conflicts, and reach out to others. Low scorers tend to find it difficult to move on after conflicts with others, holds on tirelessly to a grudge, finds it hard to forgive, and believes in retribution. Altruistic refers to an individual's level of unselfish concern for others, as well as their immediate willingness to help them. High scores take an interest in people's lives, take time out for others, get involved in others' lives, and are helpful and supportive. Low scorers are not generally interested in others, avoid getting involved in other people's problems, are very selective with the support offered to others. Modest denotes an individual's inclination to present themselves in a humble and unassuming manner. High scorers are comfortable entertaining a range of viewpoints, avoid discussing personal achievements, and quietly carries on with the task at hand. Low scorers more often insist on being the center of attention, feel superior to others, highlight strengths and achievements, and readily talk about their personal success. Empathic denotes an individual's ability to understand and share the feelings of another. High scorers are able to anticipate the needs of others, be deeply moved by the misfortunes of others, and believe people should support each other. Low scorers generally feel that it's the strongest that survives, that people should fend for themselves, and that people get what they deserve. Collaborative refers to an individual's ability to engage with others productively and efficiently. High scorers show a propensity to cooperate with others, involve others, value their opinions, and seldom act without consulting others. Low scorers tend to disregard the opinions of others, act without any consultation, prefer working alone, and rarely involve others. Constancy is the third of the TPQ Big 5 traits. Constancy denotes an individual's tendency to be less easily upset and less emotionally reactive, to be calm, to be emotionally stable, and free from persistent negative feelings. High scorers tend to be more relaxed, less emotional, and less prone to distress. Low scorers are prone to insecurity and emotional distress, and are therefore easily susceptible to experiencing more anger, stress, and depression, since their defenses are easily activated. While high levels of constancy may be perceived as desirable, it is also true that extremely high levels of constancy may predispose a person to being too carefree, and consequently, possibly underestimating potential threats in their environment. The rational profile is the foundation of such important social roles as clinical psychologists, airline pilots, and surgeons. People low on constancy, at the fixated end of the scale, are also inclined to experience ambiguous or unclear situations as threatening. The fixated profile is the foundation of such important social roles as technical writers, speech-language pathologists, and librarians. In between these two extremes are the reactives, who are able to moderate the tensions of insecurity and emotional distress, typically associated with the more fixated individual, with their more relaxed and stable side. The typical reactive operates at a less urgent pace, demonstrating higher levels of patience, having a less competitive nature, not getting upset easily, and not associating self-worth with achievement. Constancy is composed of the facets relaxed, resilient, optimistic, impervious, self-controlled, and tempered. Relaxed refers to the propensity to be free of tension and anxiety. High scorers rarely let the past bother them, find it easy to relax, do not feel threatened easily, and are relaxed most of the time. Low scorers feel threatened easily, feel guilty when unable to help others, struggle to relax, and feel tense often. Resilient refers to an individual's ability to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. High scorers typically feel comfortable with themselves, readily overcome setbacks, are not easily discouraged, and are very optimistic about life. Lower scores are usually easily discouraged, very self-critical, personalize setbacks, and tend to be more pessimistic about life. Optimistic denotes a mental attitude reflecting a belief or hope that the outcome of some specific endeavor, or outcomes in general, will be positive, favorable, and desirable. High scorers generally believe that things will turn out positively, they feel personally and socially secure, have a positive outlook on the future, and always look on the bright side. Those with lower scores tend to feel concern about the future, feel personally and socially insecure and vulnerable about life in general, and have an overriding concern that things will go wrong. Impervious refers to an individual's ability to not be easily affected by setbacks or negative experiences. High scorers are not easily bothered by things, view mistakes as learning opportunities, are not affected by criticism, and are resistant to personal criticism. Low scorers are easily overwhelmed by the possibility of making mistakes, feel crushed by setbacks, personalize criticism, and are usually very sensitive. Self-controlled is the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behavior in the face of temptations and impulses. High scorers function within their means emotionally and physically, rarely experience emotional highs and lows, are constantly in control of their actions, and seldom make rash decisions, whereas people with lower scores typically feel out of control, make rash decisions, often overcommit emotionally and physically, and experiences a host of variations in emotion. Tempered refers to an individual's ability to moderate negative emotions and behavior. High scorers rarely get irritated, are not easily annoyed, they are everything to everyone, and are very open when dealing with people. Low scorers are characterized by not being very responsive to others. They find it an effort to sustain pleasantries in social situations, and are generally unresponsive and prone to aggression. The fourth of the TPQ Big 5 traits is conscientiousness. Conscientiousness denotes a tendency to show self-discipline, act dutifully, and function in a planned rather than spontaneous way. High scores are methodical, well-organized, and dutiful. While the advantages of high conscientiousness with regard to work and education are obvious, very high levels of conscientiousness may also predispose a person to perfectionism. This conscientious profile is the foundation of many important social roles, from anesthetists to aerospace engineers to aviation inspectors. People with lower scores are more inclined to be less careful, less focused, and more likely to be distracted from tasks. The undirected profile, people who avoid structure-related stress, is the foundation of such important social roles as photonics engineers, industrial ecologists, and remote sensing scientists and technologists. In between these two extremes are the attentives, who are able to balance their structured styles with a measure of flexibility. In a sense, knowing how to moderate their tendency to be organized and persistent in a way that does not become obsessive. Conscientiousness is composed of the facets self-disciplined, dutiful, competent, structured, cautious, and directed. Self-discipline denotes an individual's willingness to tolerate difficulties and boredom in the name of completing their tasks. High scorers are driven and persistent, while those with lower scores can be seen as less tenacious and more inclined to procrastinate. It should be noted that a low score in self-discipline does not necessarily denote an inability to complete a task so much as it attests to a lack of desire to do so. Dutifulness refers to an individual's propensity to regard tasks and obligations as binding. High scorers are committed to fulfilling their promises and duties, even when it's inopportune for them to do so. Low scorers are liable to find rules and regulations confining and therefore view their obligations as suggestive rather than mandatory. Competent refers to an individual's sense of competence in pursuing their goals. High scorers naturally trust in their skills and competence, as well as their ability to maintain the focus and self-control needed to complete their tasks. Conversely, those with lower scores are likely to experience a lack of agency and often doubt their own ability to finish the tasks and goals that are set before them. Structure denotes a person's tendency to strive for order and control in their lives. High scorers are well organized and naturally inclined to apply system and structure to their pursuits. Low scorers are more inclined to improvise their way through life and prefer to switch back and forth between different tasks and endeavors. This they'll do in accordance with what makes the most sense to them at any given moment. Cautious refers to an individual's tendency to act only on the basis of thorough prior considerations. High scorers are cautious and deliberate, and inclined to mull over every option and implication in their heads before moving to act. Low scorers are more spontaneous and less inclined to worry about making wrong decisions off the cuff. Directed refers to a person's level of ambition and willingness to make sacrifices in the pursuit of success. High scorers are obsessively goal-oriented and purposeful. Those with extremely high scores may also be perceived as overly focused on work and compulsive in their need to succeed. Low scorers are more laid back with regard to goals and more inclined to approach their workloads in a way that allows them to get by without overexerting themselves. Originality, the last of the main Big 5 traits. Originality refers to an individual's appreciation for art, emotion, adventure, unusual ideas, curiosity, and variety of experience. High scorers are imaginative and original, whereas those with lower scores are more traditional and down-to-earth. In the cosmopolitan cultures of the West, the traits associated with high originality are often idealized, whereas a low originality outlook on life is framed as less desirable. However, Studies have shown that both high and low levels of originality have equal value depending on the task at hand. High levels of originality may be advantageous in creative roles like those of multimedia artists, commercial and industrial designers, and editors, while lower levels of originality tend to be more beneficial in roles like accounting, police work, and sales. In between these two extremes are the resourceful, who are able to balance their imaginative and creative styles with a measure of practicality. These are the people who are able to balance their pragmatic and creative sides. Originality is composed of the facets creative, complex, composed, conceptual, conversant, and unconventional. Creative refers to an individual's ability to use their imagination or original ideas to create something. High scorers get so involved with things that time slips by, they enjoy thinking up new ways of doing things, and they work outside the guidelines, whereas those with lower scores seldom get lost in thought, do things by the book, and are more likely to maintain the status quo. Complex refers to an individual's inclination to appreciate experiencing complex theoretical discussions and people. High scorers are more likely to base goals in life on inspiration rather than logic, understand people who think differently, show interest in theoretical discussions, and complex people. Those with lower scores are less interested in theoretical discussions, try to avoid people that are overly complex, and base their life choices on logic rather than some ideology. Composed denotes an individual's degree of preoccupation with having one's feelings and expression under control. High scorers are not easily affected by emotions, always aware of personal actions and those of others, not excitable, and rarely experience mood shifts. Those with lower scores are easily excited, more likely guided by moods, easily affected by emotions, and may lack awareness of consequence of personal actions. Conceptual refers to an individual's ability to understand the fundamental building blocks of thoughts and beliefs. High scorers are more likely to probe things more deeply than others, enjoy the process of thinking, be able to stay with an interest for a long time, and do not get bored easily. Low scorers are more likely to lose interest very quickly, get bored easily, and prefer living in the physical rather than in the abstract. It should be noted that being conceptual does not say anything about an individual's aptitude for intellectual pursuits, but only denotes their preferred degree of engagement with abstractions. Conversant refers to an individual's knowledgeability about a range of things. High scorers are good at many things, comfortable relating to a broad spectrum of topics, can focus on multiple things at the same time, and tend to feel comfortable in any discussion. Those with lower scores rarely focus on many things at the same time, are likely to feel out of depth in certain social contexts, are not comfortable conversing on broad issues, and tend to be good at fewer things. Unconventional refers to an individual's propensity not to conform to what is generally done or believed, but to think outside the box. High scorers believe that there is no absolute right or wrong, and do not put great emphasis on tradition. Those with lower scores believe in the importance of tradition, are more likely to play by the rules, likely believe in universal truths, and that there is no middle of the road. So, those were the main big 5 traits along with the 30 facets, as defined by the Townsend Personality Questionnaire. Thank you for spending this time navigating this groundbreaking personality measure with me. Keep an eye out for our next post on the Townsend Emotional Intelligence Inventory. If you'd like to use the TPQ or any other SkillWorks Africa assessment for your consultancy or business, there's a link to the SkillWorks Africa website in the video description below, where you can access our fully automated SkillWorks assessment system for free. Our system is a unique white-label psychological assessment solution that will help you use your business's branding to offer our pre-packaged assessment products as your own. This without the need to invest a cent in infrastructure or delivery technology. It's easy to use and makes your assessment administration professional, simple and affordable. Thanks for your time, and please like and subscribe to our channel. Keep well and see you soon.